Now we're going to go back on to our next topic again, and this will be Jimmy Wallace. Now, you may think, hey, I know the name Jimmy Wallace, but really what you know is Jim Wallace, or J. Warner Wallace, the cold case detective, who is often covered on this channel, who has written books like God's Crime Scene, Cold Case Christianity, Person of Interest, basically a lot of crime-solving theme-based apologetics books. He has taken to including his son, Jimmy. Apparently they're like 4th or 5th generation Jim Wallaces, that they're just not creative in their family, but giving names. Young Jimmy has joined him on the channel to give a younger, fresher take on certain things. What you should know is that Jimmy Wallace is also a police officer, actually works in the same detective unit that his father did. They have a very similar story there, although young Jimmy became a Christian at a young age after his father converted. But all that said, this is Jimmy Wallace. Let's hear what he has to say. He's going to be sideways, because that's just the way it's going to be.
I know plenty of people personally who just don't like the way that the God of the Bible is. And for them, the way that they see that God in the Bible is a major barrier to faith in Christianity. And I gotta be honest, I agree with them sometimes. I sometimes will be frustrated. Why didn't God do this or say that? Why isn't he exactly the way that I would have him be if I was in control? Why does he not act when there's a tragedy? There are times when I am frustrated or even don't like the way that God acted based on my own opinion.
So what he's describing there is often called the problem of evil, or at least in some circles that argument is, or that thought process is given a name, the problem of evil, and rather an apologetic for God. It's one of the few arguments that is leveled in actual attack of Christianity or any kind of religion that would claim that it has a God that is all-loving. Now, it's only an argument against such religions that have that claim, because of course if you wanted to claim that the universe was created by a pantheon of gods who are not morally perfect and don't necessarily care and have their own selfish motives, blah blah blah, the problem of evil is irrelevant and doesn't make a lot of sense. It really only works against, again, the Abrahamic God. It's religions generally, because they're the ones that put forth this monotheist, perfect, morally perfect being. Now here's the thing, and part of the reason I'm bringing this up is that it came up on Twitter in the last few days about my stance on the problem of evil. And even though I have a few videos on my channel regarding the problem of evil, I've never really understood it as a great argument against theism. I think I'm in the minority there. I think people like Bart Ehrman became an atheist agnostic specifically because of the problem of evil. And I know lots of other people for whom that is true. And if that is you, that's great. I just don't personally get it. And perhaps it was part of my indoctrination. Again, the idea being that God, if God was all loving, he should have intervened here or should have intervened there or should have prevented certain things. I still hold, and this might be heretical, I'm hoping I'm not bursting any bubbles or making people feel uncomfortable. I still hold that if there is a monotheistic God who is all loving and all knowing and all powerful and all good, that it is possible that in the long game that he might have morally sufficient reasons for allowing certain things, because an all-knowing God would know over the span of the billions of years of the universe. I could never go back to that young Earth view. To the billions of years in the universe, that allowing a certain section of suffering, allowing a certain child to have cancer, or allowing famine that wipes out villages and kids and school shootings and all these things. Can there be a moral reason why that might be acceptable? I have to say that I'm mortal, and in that situation, I just don't know. Like, it's plausible to me. So I think it's a good reason. I think it's really good for us to ask, why didn't an all-loving God do that? And can we make any sense of it at all? But what I don't think it is a defeater. You may disagree, and I look forward to lively comments on this. But I've gone on record on this in several other videos, but I'm going on record again. Problem of evil doesn't actually dissuade me from theism.
That's not really the way it works. I really have to ask the question, is God real? Is Christianity true from the start? Because if that God exists, and whether I like him or not, whether he's the way I want him to be or not, I still have to deal with him. He still exists and would have certain desires for me. So I gotta first ask, is Christianity true?
And that's where I landed. That for me was the bigger deal, was aside from all the consequences of God being true, I first needed to figure out, is God true? And in the case with Jimmy here, is the God of Christianity true? And based on that, deal with the reality that I'm given.
Does God exist? Then I can ask the question, how should I respond to that fact? I can't really ask myself, what's my opinion beforehand, and say, if I don't like that God, I can just ignore him.
I'm with him. Strangely, I'm with Jimmy Wallace on this. If God is true, that's the first question to ask. The first question to ask isn't, do I like what this God is doing or has done in the past? That has no bearing. My feelings have no bearing on the truth. My feelings have no bearing on reality. Whether or not I understand that this God is morally sufficient or not, that's a whole different argument. I do get why people, again, will turn away from the Abrahamic gods for this reason, because they think it is such a contradiction. I'm just not there. The reason I bring this up in general, and why this video clip that came up yesterday resonated with me, was that someone asked me on the Atheist Experience after show this last week. I was co-hosting, and someone in the after show asked me, again, the same question a lot of Christians ask is, if Christianity was true, would you worship God? And I know a lot of non-believers will say something strong like that. No, even though if they proved to them today, to their absolute satisfaction, that God existed, the God of the Bible, no, I would not worship that God, because that God is a moral monster. He allowed genocide, and he commanded the death of infants, and he commanded all kinds of atrocities, and in his name so many bad things have been done. So those atheists, those non-believers, are going to shake their fist at God even though they know he exists, and refuse to worship him. And I have a slightly non-standard answer to that, which is what I wanted to talk about with you guys today. And my non-standard answer to that is, it depends on what hell I become convinced is true along with that. If I become convinced that the version of Christianity that is true is one that allows either universalism or annihilation. So the first view, universalism, is the notion that some Christians believe that all people will go to heaven anyway, because Jesus paid for all of our sins, and that accepting him isn't actually a requirement for salvation. Okay, so that's a universalist. The second one, the nihilistic view, is the idea that whether or not there is some period of torture, that eventually the souls of the non-believers who don't get to go to heaven will end, and that it is not eternal conscious torment. They will either be just gone from existence as soon as they die, or maybe there'll be an embarrassing judgment day and some torture, and then they're gone. So if either of those views are true, then I would see no reason to actually worship the God, because it's actually my preference to not live forever and go to heaven. So I'd be rooting for this nihilistic view. If universalism is true, and I'm forced against my will to live for eternity, at least I'm in heaven. So A and B options, not worshiping the God because it doesn't matter. Option C is that I become convinced of a Christianity that has eternal conscious torment. What do I do then? I would love to think that I had the moral fortitude to shake my fist at God and say, screw you, you're immoral, and I'm not going to worship you. But I'm also a realist. And I don't want to be tortured eternally, forever. Eternally and forever being synonyms, consciously. So the pragmatic part of me would need to figure out whether or not worship from such a person who's doing it purely pragmatically also gets me into heaven. If it doesn't, well, then I might be screwed, because I'd have to come around. But here's the other thing that I thought about after the after show, which is again why I'm talking about this. When a Christian wants to corner me, and this has happened to me a lot of times, so that if you came to believe that God was true, would you worship him? It implies, would I love him? And then the question is a little bit like saying, if you came to find a human person who met all of your criteria for what you have envisioned for the perfect mate, so they look exactly the way you would want them to look, and they behave exactly the way you want them to behave, and they have all the interests you would wish for, all those things. So you found that person. Would you love them? And the honest person would have to say, I don't know. Like you don't love someone because of a list of checklist items. You love someone because you get to know them, and you have emotional bonds, and you have shared experiences, and like all the stuff that comes into love comes in to loving someone is not this criteria. So the fact that God made me doesn't mean that I'm going to love him. The fact that he's perfect, again, it's tough to imagine that you might just love someone because they're perfect. If someone's like perfect at chess, that doesn't, and I like chess, that doesn't mean I'm going to necessarily love that person. So I think that this is just a garbage question by the theists who want to throw it back to me for lots of reasons, but I have my A, B, and C scenarios. But I now think it's just ridiculous to ask whether or not I can predict in the future that I will love someone that I've never met. I think the ball is in the court of that God to endear themselves enough to us to cause us to love them. So again, you don't just love someone because they make a sacrifice for you. You love them for a myriad of other reasons. So Christians, that's my answer, my definitive answer to that question as of the day that this was recorded. And you need to come up with a better question because yours is garbage. But perhaps you disagree. Perhaps you think it's a great question. Let me know in the comments whether I'm off base, whether you think that I'm a chicken and I need to repent of my hypothetical scenario ways and shake my fist at a God who would not care whether I thought he was a moral monster or not, theoretically, if the Christian Bible is true. But maybe I'm wrong, and maybe most of you, I think, disagree with me on this. So let me know in the comments why I'm wrong.